Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Anderson, and this is Webinar on Wednesday with Destinations Together. As always, a warm welcome to our Zoom listeners and cruise line executives that are tuning in. Since the Memorial Day weekend, the nation has been in turmoil with social unrest and rioting in many major cities across the U.S. This may help fuel a second spike in the virus and will certainly extend the stay-at-home economy. This situation at every level is screaming out for leadership. So, today's topic, presented by Dan Cockerell, is perfect: leading through crisis. In other news this week, Canada effectively terminated the Alaska season and Canada-New England season by extending the ban on cruise ships in Canadian waters to the end of October. Conversely, various Caribbean islands and European destinations are setting plans to open. In addition, there appears to be some wanderlust as bookings continue to rise, fueling the increase of travel stocks. To maintain this positive booking trend, the customer must feel safe during every aspect of the trip. Whether traveling on an airline, cruise line, or visiting a destination and staying in a hotel, they must have confidence that the necessary protocols are always followed and the staff is properly trained. This is only accomplished through effective leadership. So, as various countries and destinations begin to open on the heels of this crisis, the key element of success is leadership by both government and private business sectors. Today's topic is all about leadership, and I'm confident that you will leave today's session with practical and tactical techniques on leadership to enhance the culture in your business. Today, Dan will pass on leadership skills that will teach you not to light a fire underneath your team, but how to light the fire within each team member. Today's presentation is hosted by Destinations Together, which is an open platform of relevant information and collaboration to support the cruise industry and to support you, the tour and port operators. It is designed to help everyone connect, collaborate, and hopefully find solutions to bridge the gap until cruise ships and tourism return to your region. Please visit our website at www.destinationstogether.com and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Also, don't miss next week's webinar on Wednesday entitled Thinking Differently with New Technology. 3 key Vox executives will demonstrate how their cutting-edge technology can help you supercharge and develop a totally new product line for your destination. I'll turn this over to Larry to share some important information and then introduce our speaker for today's Destinations Together webinar on Wednesday.
Thanks, Tom. We want to thank you all for joining us today. We also want to recognize our guest speaker from last week's topic, Jamaica Tourism Reengineered, with John Biles, Managing Partner, Chukka Caribbean Adventure Tours. Also, a special shout out to Steve Nielsen for leading the discussion with John. Before we get started, let me remind you of a few housekeeping rules. We are recording the webinar and we'll upload it in the next few days. We will use the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to send through questions and comments so that we can present as many of the questions to Dan as possible. You can also vote on questions listed in the Q&A to help ensure we include the most relevant ones. Please remember, we and our guests are only providing the opinions and possible sources for further intel. Okay, let's get this show on the road, a Disney term. Let me introduce our featured speaker to talk about the topic today, leading through crisis. With 26 years of experience with the Walt Disney Company, Dan Cockerell will share his expertise based on his learnings, successes, and failures, as well as his perspective on the current pandemic. Dan is also the author of the book, How's the Culture in Your Kingdom?, to be released later this summer. Dan believes the future is bright and there are many opportunities for those who have a growth mindset, are open to new ideas, and willing to gain diverse experiences. This session will be very interactive during and after Dan's session. We have gotten quite a few questions already. I have also read Dan's book. I got an early copy. I'm on chapter 10. Haven't finished it yet, Dan. But you know, very, very enlightening, very easy, short chapters, and a lot of useful tools and great stories. And it kind of, you know, put me back into working at Disney and understanding some of my team's successes and failures, as well as mine personally. Dan will also be asking questions on chat box as we go, so keep your eyes on that. Tom and I will be monitoring the Q&A box to check on questions during the presentation. Dan and I really never crossed paths during the Disney days, as I was with Disney Cruise Line and Dan was with Disney Parks and Resorts. We did have a mutual friend though, his father, Lee Cockerell, who I worked with Marriott Corporation moons ago, and then for a short time when I was in the resort side at Walt Disney World prior to joining Disney Cruise Line. But you can imagine with 70,000 cast members, hard to meet everybody, but Dan was definitely well known as a great leader. Dan, I'm happy to have you join us today, and we really look forward to your presentation and learnings during the next 45 minutes or so. Dan, take it away.
Hey, Larry, thanks very much. And thank you all for joining today and giving us your time. I think it is fantastic what you're all doing is to come together and talk about these things. I've been leading a lot of calls over the past few months, and I think chatting with people, getting a different point of view, getting perspective during these times is incredibly important. And I would encourage you all to keep learning along the way, which is going to be a big part of my message today. And Tom, you mentioned wanderlust. It's one of my favorite words. My wife and I love traveling, and we've been obviously like everyone else in shelter in place. So 2 months ago, she said, well, I'm going to Trader Joe's. And I was like, she didn't say another word. I said, I'll go. She said, are you serious? I said, yes, I want to go on a trip. So anytime we can get out now and socialize with people is a great time. Today's the theme of today's presentation is on leadership in crisis. And I put something a little more specific here, crisis response, and how you think about creativity, flexibility, and change. Because those are three things I think are incredibly important right now as we navigate through this. And I'll tell you, it's not just the pandemic. I think, as was mentioned at the beginning, we have a lot of civil unrest right now, which wasn't even 10 days ago, wasn't even on the radar. And now that's hitting us. I just saw, a report of the first tropical storm of the year, which is earlier than hurricane season coming through. So there are a lot of changes happening right now, and there's a lot going on. So I would just tell you what I'm going to talk about today isn't just for a pandemic. It's not just for a time of crisis. I think this is how leadership should be all the time, just to a higher level right now because of all the disruption that's happening. And as I said, put on here, keep calm and play the long game. And what I mean by that is I've taken a look at the S&P 500 chart since 1950. And I'm not going to say that the S&P 500, the American stock market, is the marker of all success in life, but it certainly shows economic success and when times get tough and jobs aren't available. And you see on there that basically since 1950 to today, it has consistently gone up with dips in 1987, which was Black Monday, the tech in 2001, 9/11, the 2018 recession, what we're going through now, but it always comes back. Business always comes back. People are resilient, and you really do need to play the long game and think about long-term, how you're not only managing your teams, but managing your health, managing yourself along the way. So to give you a little bit of background on who I am, as we mentioned, I spent some time at Walt Disney World, actually most of my adult life, worked there in college, and then joined Disney full-time in 1991 as a parking attendant. I graduated from Boston University with a political science degree. And when I came back to Disney, they felt that the only thing I was really qualified to do at that point was park cars, which was true. And I did that for about 6 months and then moved to Disneyland Paris, France, and opened the park over there as a frontline manager, and spent 5 years in France. And then my wife and I moved back to the United States in 1997, and I proceeded to take the next 22 years working at Walt Disney World in theme parks and resort hotels. And then I left Disney 2 years ago this month, and my wife and I started our own consulting company. And so we do speaking now, we're doing webinars, we are doing consulting for hospitality companies, and we're just learning a lot about being entrepreneurs. After a long career at Disney, we sort of have a whole new career ahead of us now, and it's been very exciting. But since all our kids are gone now and out of the house working and going to college, we have plenty of time on our hands to do something differently. Here's my boss, Mickey Mouse. As I tell people, don't be fooled by his really nice smile and his furry ears. He demanded quarterly earnings, and you did not miss your targets. So I think a big part of today, what I'm going to talk about is in the Disney model, the accountability matrix, we call it. Not only at Disney are you held accountable to getting results, but you're held accountable to how you get those results. And that's when you get the mix of the right leadership and the right accountability to push forward for results. That's when you start, you have a world-class company. And I think as leaders out there, you have to think about both of those things every single day. How hard are you going to push your teams and keep them engaged and still be able to have them be motivated to be able to reach the goals that you're striving for? And as Larry mentioned, just finished up a book. I'll tell you more at the end, and we'll send out on the deck how you can purchase one of these books. They come out in bookstores August 11th, but we have a website that we're selling early copies if you're interested in hearing about that. So some of the themes for today, the first one is really mindset. Mindset is, and I've knew this growing up, mindset is so important of how you see the world, how you're thinking about things. There's a lot of quotes out there, and I know one of my favorites is, 90% of what happens to you, or 10% of what happens to you, is beyond your control, and 90% is how you react to it. You have a choice. Every time something happens, you have a choice of how you're going to take that information, whether you're going to react negatively, whether you're going to react with blame, whether you're going to take responsibility and step up. And we see that every day. Just open look at the front page of your newspaper, and you're going to see stories every single day of leadership and mindset and the way people decide to come at things. And I love this photo. Back in 1996, I was the operations manager at the American Adventure Pavilion at Epcot. And if you've ever been to the American Adventure, it's a great film about the history of the United States and all the strife and all the difficulties of, having a democracy. And we're seeing that today. I was just telling Larry and Tom last night, my wife and I went to downtown Orlando, and the second time in our lives, we've been involved in a real live protest. And it was fantastic. It was a lot of younger people, a lot of profanity, a lot of yelling, a lot of emotion, but the police were there. They played their part to keep everyone safe. All the protesters played their part. And, as long as we were there, there was no violence, and everyone expressed themselves. And I think that's how America works. The public brings up issues, and hopefully we address them. So the statues at the end of the American Adventure, there's sort of avatars that represent all the personalities of sort of what made America come to life. The one in the front here is the spirit of individualism. And these are all the different spirits of Americans over time who've decided to move forward and be able to take things on. So during this pandemic, just like a lot of other companies, my wife and I had 6 months of speeches, workshops, traveling were gone just overnight. Everything got canceled. We were going to head down to Australia this fall. That's canceled. So, we got home and we said, well, what are we going to do? I'm thinking to myself, boy, maybe Disney doesn't look that bad these days to be at Disney. And then they closed. And so we decided, you know what, we are going to get up every morning and we're just going to keep working, and we're going to push forward, and we're going to figure things out. And during that time, I created 10 mastermind groups. Every 2 weeks, I was on a different group on Zoom. I had people from Australia, from Europe, from South America, from the United States, Canada, the UK. And we would get on with a bunch of people and just talk about how we were all handling the situation and brainstorming solutions. And we helped some people sort of figure out some innovative ways to move their business forward. And I'll tell you some stories about that into the presentation. I also started a podcast. I do a weekly podcast called Come Rain or Shine. But one day I just said, you know what, we should do a daily podcast, maybe 7-10 minutes long, not too long, but let's do something daily and start talking to people, because people are trying to get through every single day, being furloughed, being unemployed. And every day I talked about it. We called it Lemons to Lemonade. And if you know that term, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And that really reminded me every day to get up and keep going. And we've been busier than we've ever been. We're converting all our materials onto webinars format. My book, I launched a website. I've learned a ton about marketing. I'm working with nonprofit organizations now. So, the silver lining is there's a bunch of things that we have done in the past 3 months we would never had time to do if we hadn't been at home. and we didn't have a choice. We had to be sheltered at home. So once again, making the best of your situation and having that positive growth mindset is incredibly important. I'm a huge believer in karma. I'm a huge believer that people create their own luck. And I see it happen again and again and again, that people reach out to me, they email me, we have a conversation, all of a sudden they're looking for a job. I know somebody and I connect them, or I'll reach out to someone who left me a voicemail and we'll talk. And then maybe 6 months later, they'll call me back and say, you know what, we have a conference in Croatia. Can you come speak? So you just never know where the next opportunity is coming from. And what I found is you can't lead your life just focusing on things you think are going to have a return on investment. I think you just generally have to be open-minded. You have to engage. You have to try to learn something every single day and be curious. And in today's day and age, I'll tell you, I still do not take the internet for granted. It is unreal now just how much stuff is out there. There's no reason to not know anything anymore. You can learn about anything instantaneously. And the irony is we can do that, but how many people don't take advantage of that? So once again, mindset is a huge piece. I would suggest, if you want to learn more about this topic, Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset. And she took it from authors who had done a lot of studies before her time, but she really teased it up really well. And I think the more you can change your behaviors and how you think about things, the quicker you're going to be in a much better position to solve problems. Disney and myself, I fit that mold. I've always been a very optimistic person, very outgoing. And I think people who are maybe sometimes pessimistic think that's kind of naive. If you're always being positive, why aren't you paying attention to the negatives in life? And my point of view is, look, I know there's negatives in life, but I can either dwell on them or I can focus on moving forward. And I once again, I don't think this is just something to do during a pandemic, but I think as a leader, when you can role model that energy and that positivity, your team's going to come along with you. And the people who don't want to be that way are going to self-select out, and they're going to go find their happiness someplace else. So as a leader, once again, and the title of my book is, I think as a leader, you create the culture in your kingdom. And it's up to you to create that culture, and your people will follow along. I had one example of what I love is mindset. There's a lot of stories to this photo, but back when I was the vice president at Disney's Hollywood Studios, we had Star Wars weekends. This is way before the Galaxy's Edge opened there. And I met a guy at a boot camp I attended near my house, and it turns out one of his roles was the head of the Rebel Squadron here in Orlando for the Star Wars. So I talked to him. I said, well, how do I get in on this? I want to be a Rebel pilot. He said, well, we're going to make you an honorary member. So I would march with him every year, and I made a lot of contacts and learned a lot about the business just being with those people. But the lady in this photo, this was about 10 years ago, but this is my 88-year-old mother-in-law. And she lives in France and Lyon. And she's been in shelter in place for, coming up on 3.5 months now. She was 10 years old at the end of World War II. She remembers American soldiers coming into Lyon in Jeeps and freeing France. And at 88 years old, when this all started, she got on her sewing machine, and she's made about 500 masks now out of material for nurses, and she donates those masks. So once again, you talk about growth mindset. 88 years old, she's not sitting back and just kind of protecting herself. She's out there contributing. And I told myself, if she can do that, then I probably can figure something else out too. So she's great. And, I don't like to tell my wife this, but she actually loves me more than her daughter. So I don't bring that up at home, but we get along really well with my mother-in-law. So Larry, I forgot to look at you all. I know you're going to pepper in some questions along the way. So what's going on?
That's okay. Thanks, Dan. I just want to reference something in your book and ask you to kind of talk a little bit about it. But you referenced that we don't have a personal life nor a professional life. We have one life.
Yes.
What's that all about?
Yeah. Well, you can run your life the way you want to run it, obviously. But I think, a lot of people like to say, well, I want to compartmentalize things. I want my professional life and my personal life, and I want to keep them separate. And I don't want them kind of overflowing into each other. But I'm not a believer in that. I believe in integration. You should integrate things. And talk about integration. People are being forced to integrate their life now because they're doing business out of their house. They've done that. And actually, I talked to my son this morning. He's up in Boston. He works for a biomed company. And we were discussing that. And I think there's been something that has been a dynamic during the COVID is, work is now coming into your living room. And usually your house is a safe place to be. And now your boss is in your house. And psychologically, that's a whole different dynamic. And so I think this integration is really important. And you think about it. I've told people, get a separate room of your house where it's sort of your office, a place you can go psychologically. You can flip the switch and that's where work is. And when you leave that room, you're back in your personal life again. But when I was working at Disney, if you wanted to have balance, you had to integrate and you had to be flexible and you had to sacrifice. And I tied my whole life together. And I realized that, what, if I don't feel good personally, if I'm not taking care of myself physically, if I'm not mentally dealing with things, learning how to handle stress, if I'm not organized, if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not eating right, that impacts my ability to lead my family and lead at work. And so these are all interconnected. Now, different cultures have different looks on this. When I worked in France, usually you'd have to know someone for a long time before you'd get to know who they were personally, because people didn't mix work and personal life. Americans, I think, were much more open with that. But I used to tell my team, you know what? If you need to leave early to go to your kid's soccer game or play or something, I expect you to go. I also expect the work to get done, but you need to figure out what that looks like. And so the more I think we can give people flexibility, and don't tell them how to get the work done. Tell them what your goals are, what results you're looking for, and have them figure that out. The worst thing I've seen recently, they're starting to say that companies are starting to put like these, monitors on people's computers so they can monitor what time they log into their computer and log out and their keystrokes. I think that's the beginning of the end. I think it's a terrible idea. You either trust your people or you don't trust your people. And if you don't trust them, get rid of them. And if you trust them, don't monitor them. Let them do their jobs, give them clear expectations, and let them run with that. So, I have one calendar. And when I worked at Disney, I had call my wife, go to the PTA meeting, go to the teachers meeting, go to the Magic Kingdom 5-year planning meeting. They're all on the same calendar and they're integrated in there. And the more I could figure that out, I was able to squeeze out more time and take care of my family, take care of myself, and be able to contribute to my career. Thanks, Larry. Good question. So when it comes to your business right now, there's 4 or 5 big things I'll go through, and I want to get to the Q&A because that's my favorite part of this, and we'll get there. But the first one, get organized and know your numbers. Right now, you got to know what reality is, and you have to face it. And I think sometimes during these bad times, no one wants to face how bad business is. Like, hey guys, we went from X million to 0, and we're gonna have 0 for the next 6 months. What are we gonna do? When I left Disney, my wife and I talked about it. She said, all right, she likes to be practical. Dan, what happens if we don't make a dime? How long can we live this lifestyle and not have to dip into our retirement? And I said, we got 18 months with our expenses and everything. We can do nothing for 18 months and we'll be perfectly fine. And I said, I think we're going to make at least a dime over the next 18 months. We'll see where it goes from there. So we were very practical, and I've never known my personal budget more than I know it today. When the pandemic came and 6 months your business gets wiped away, we dug in. Where are our expenses? We use Mint. There's a lot of programs out there. We happen to use Mint. It ties into our bank accounts. I know exactly where I'm spending money. I know how much I'm paying on the mortgage, how much I'm paying for my daughter's rent, how much we pay in groceries. And I understood our expenses. I looked at what our incoming revenue was going to be. I started to figure out maybe if we sold some books that could help with that. And we knew our numbers, and it's helped us get through this without having a lot of financial stress. And it's not because we just had a big pile of money. It's because we've thought very carefully about how we spend our money and focused on that. So I think personally it's important, and for your business it's important. How long can you keep your business running? How long can you furlough people? Can you take your people to 50% pay for a period of time instead of laying them off and be able to come back when things begin to loosen up again? So this is where you really want to hit the reality of what's happening and be as transparent as you can with your teams. But I've always learned, and we did this at Disney, plan for the worst and hope for the best. Don't plan for the best, because you're going to fail every time. And if you plan for the worst, you're always going to be in a better position than you would have been otherwise. Be really conservative when it comes to planning for your business. Tom or Larry, any other comments on that from a business perspective?
Sorry, I had you on mute. Just back to, if you think about, the different tools we used at Disney, talking to our cast members to better understand, one, they were the closest, pulse to the guest, and tons and tons of different ideas. And we, as far as I remember, we got lots of feedback, not only guests, but what to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll jump into that. The next one here, this is another key one, understanding your customers. I think Tom mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that your customers, your clients, your guests, they got to feel safe. They're going to have to feel safe when we reopen, and we have to all figure out what that means, because every culture is different. Someone who's 60, 65 years old has a whole different definition of safe than a 21-year-old has, who is invincible. And so I think over time, you really have to break down the demographics of who your customers are and what their definition is going to be of being safe. I think we're all seeing protocols starting to emerge from various industries. But the problem is they're not all consistent across all the states, because even all the states have different protocols of what they consider to be required, and various countries have different protocols. So, if you go to a restaurant in Orlando, and we've been to a couple of restaurants over the past week or two, every server is wearing a mask. But then I talked to Tom, and you said down in Miami, that's not necessarily the case. Servers aren't necessarily wearing masks. If you go up to Maryland, you literally cannot go into a supermarket without wearing a mask. You'll be told you have to have one. You go to Florida or some of the southern states, and it's a 50-50 split. And so I think over time, you're going to have to figure out and get into your customers' minds, what is the minimum you're going to need to do to be able to run your business? And, when you bring politics into it, then you have the people who refuse to wear masks. And what's your policy going to be around that? Are you going to serve them, or are you going to say you're not going to do business with them? I don't have the answer to that. But the more you can understand the attitudes of your customers, their expectations, and their changing expectations, I think you're going to be in a much better place. So once you get in that meeting and you brainstorm masks, and you brainstorm hand washing, and you brainstorm hand washing dispensers, and how you're going to wipe things and clean things, and all the signage you're going to put in place, do not forget to go back to your customers, whether that's reading about your customers in your industry in the newspaper, or the newsletters that come out in your industry, or just call them. Call your customers. If you're in the cruise industry, I would be on the phone every single day with my regular cruisers who I know are regulars, and talk to them and say, hey, what's on your mind? What are the questions you're asking? Go to the chat boards, go to social media where cruisers hang out, or people in your industry hang out, and see what their comments are. What are they going to be looking for? What is going to be the way that's going to make them decide whether they're ready to come back or not? And then also, you're going to want to understand the price sensitivity. Are they going to expect discounts coming back in or not? And once again, this is something you should be doing all the time. But you should ramp it up even higher now, because of the fact that we are in a very much of a changing environment right now. That's going to be really important. Secondly, understanding your employees. This is almost the same thing. You're going to have to put requirements in place. You're going to have to put policies in place. There's probably going to be state and local and federal regulations you're going to have to put in place coming out from this. And you got to understand your employees' point of view. So I'm going to just ask a quick question here, and you can put yes or no. Or what I'll say is, over the past 3 months, how many times do you think you or your management team have talked to the employees that you furloughed or laid off? Over 3 months, how many times have you spoken with them personally by phone? Called them, checked up on them to see how they're doing with this? So if y'all just want to put some numbers in there, you can put 0, you can put, 50, whatever times you checked in. Does anyone have any feedback? How many times have you checked in with your people? Once daily. That's a great answer. That's like over the top. 3 to 4 times a week. Okay. So the point is, I think a lot of you are getting it 30 times management, employees once per week, checked in. Okay, I think you all get it then. That's why you're on this webinar, because you want to learn more. their employers staying connected with people and engaged with people during this time, they are going to remember this. When we come back out of this, they're going to decide how committed they are to your company, and how committed they are is how you took care of them during these tough times. Were you able to help them out? Were you able to take care of them during this time? One of the things I've been telling people is, in a management role, call people and check on them. And at the end of the call, say, look, is there anything I can do for you? A lot of people think, well, if I don't want to open that can of worms. Yeah, what you can do for me is give me all my money again and bring me back to work. And well, I can't do that right now, but what do you need? And some people may say, you know what, I'm in a really bad situation. We have a medical issue and I can't afford the bill right now. Well, if you run a business, you can start helping find solutions. It doesn't mean you're going to solve the problem, but the more empathetic you can be right now with your employees, understanding their points of view, how they're handling things, is going to make a big difference. I'll tell you, everyone's going through this differently. Everyone's having a different experience. If you live in a big city, it's really stressful because you're in your apartment, you're in wherever you are. If you live in a more rural area, this has probably been a pretty good experience. You know, aside from the financial hardships, you're able to get out, enjoy nature, and be with your family, and maybe do some other things. My wife and I, those that we know who have little kids, I can't imagine being home and homeschooling my 3 kids. I would have killed at least one of them by now, if not injured them. It would have been pretty rough for us to have our kids at home. So anyway, everyone's having a different experience through this, and you just have to be empathetic to that. And then think a lot about the, people coming back. I think one of the questions that had come up is, we have older employees. What if you have an employee that's maybe 60, 65 years old who has said, they're sort of in a risk group with the COVID-19? And I said, well, you can't guarantee their safety. No one ever can. You can't guarantee someone's safety, but you certainly can update them, communicate them on everything you're doing, ask them what else that they would feel comfortable with if they were to come back to work. But then they have to make a decision whether they're going to feel like they can do that or not. And it's going to be, I think companies are going to have to get more and more used to having clear policies, but also learn how to have guidelines and be flexible, because policies are going to be all over the place. And if you try to just pick a policy and say this is a way across the board, you're going to lose some good people. So there's what I'll call this is a dilemma. There's no solution, but you're going to have to walk the line between being consistent and thinking about people as individuals. And that's what I think leadership's about. It's being consistent, but still seeing people as individuals. The next one here, learn. This is, once again, during pandemic, not during pandemic. There's so much today that you need to know. You just have to be connected. You have to be reading every day. You need to be reading about your industry. You need to be reading about other industries. I've found that some of the best ideas come from other industries. That's how a lot of innovation happens. But don't get caught up in just executing every day. Take some time to open your mind up and learn more. I'll tell you, the past 2 years being away from Disney, I've learned more and developed myself more in the past 2 years than I had in the previous 10. And that's not a coincidence. When you're Disney, you're executing the plan every day. You're in operations, getting the job done, being consistent in how you deliver service, and trying to hit your budgets. And if I was going to go back to Disney, I certainly would have thought differently about how I spent my time, because that learning process and learning how to do things differently is very refreshing, and actually brings a whole another point of view to the table. I looked this up. This actually, I was going to say Charles Darwin said this, and everyone thinks he did, but it's actually kind of a misnomer, but it plays along those lines. It's not the most intellectual species that survives. It's not the strongest that survives, but the species that survives is the one that's able to best adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. And your power to adapt right now is going to be sometimes the only thing you can do. And I was telling Tom and Larry about a couple stories I've seen recently. One was a pizza place in New York City, and they closed down for COVID. They couldn't serve because 70% of their business was pizza by the slice. And, delivering pizza by the slice is not a good business plan. And so they tried to figure out what to do. And someone said, well, you know what we have? We have ovens, and we have ovens that get up to 800, 900 degrees. You know what we can do? We can start making masks. And so they started working with a local vendor, and they're able to get the heat up so they can bend the masks in the right way. And so when they come out of this, they might be a pizza place on one side, and right next door, they may be a mask facility because of the heat they're able to generate with these ovens. There was a new restaurant that opened like 2 weeks after it opened. It had to shut down. Most restaurants are going out of business. They said, you know what, we're going to start delivering. And they told all the servers, you can be furloughed or you can become delivery people instead of servers. And the servers said, we want to keep this business open. And they flipped their model upside down. And the next day they were delivering gourmet meals. I was working with a guy in Bowling Green, Ohio. He runs a coffee shop up there. And he closed one day. The next day, he brought up a text number and he put it out on Instagram. If you want coffee delivered to your house, text this number. And we have a Venmo account, and just send us the money on our Venmo and we'll deliver the coffee to you. And then eventually over the next month, he ramped up. He created more of an automated service. He started to bring a barista bar to people's front door. So he'd set up the little barista bar, put the coffee on it. When they opened the door, he'd call their name. They'd pick up the coffee. He'd take the barista bar down, put it back in his car. He started delivering cookies. He started doing a marketing campaign where he had other people send people coffee, because during these times, people love helping each other, and he took advantage of that, and it doubled his business. So once again, it's your choice. You can sit down on your couch and be a victim, or you can get up and go try something. And if it doesn't work, go try something else and just keep trying something until the environment gets better. And that's what mindset's all about. And that, that brings us to innovation. Larry, yeah.
Dan, just one more from the book, if you may. But we always look for differentiating our product. And in one of the chapters, you referenced what was going on when SeaWorld and Universal were in our footsteps right behind us, and what happened after that. If you could take and explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so that was really, I mean, it's a fantastic case study, but we were trying to figure out Walt Disney World. Harry Potter was opening. SeaWorld had some great deals going. You could go for 2 days and get an annual pass. And so Disney, we had a lot of business, but we don't want to lose our market share. And so the question became, how do we get people, how do we get more visits? How do we get people not going to Universal? How do we get people not going to SeaWorld? How do we get them to stay at our property? And someone came up with an idea, and they said, you know what? Let's do this. Let's have people book their reservation. Let's mail them luggage tags in whichever city they're flying from. And let's make a deal with the airport. So when people fly into Orlando, instead of their luggage going to the luggage carousel, we'll have a company take all that luggage out of the stream, go to a warehouse, sort it out, put it on trucks, and deliver it to the hotel where that guest is staying, and deliver it to their room. And then you know what else we're going to do? We're going to buy a bunch of buses, and we're going to give people free transportation from the airport to Walt Disney World. And we're going to have a video. We're going to get them excited about it, and it's going to be great thing. And so I got home and I told my wife about the plan. She said, wow, that's amazing. How much is that going to cost customers? I said, it's free. She said, it's free. What kind of business is that? Free. I said, well, let's think about that a little bit. Once I get to, first of all, it's a differentiated service. I don't want to deal with my luggage. I already got these kids and a stroller and everything. If I don't have to touch my luggage again, that's great. But guess what? If I don't have to rent a car, how much more money am I going to save? And if I give you a free bus, you don't have to rent a car now. And by the way, once you get on your free bus to Walt Disney World and you want to go down the street to see Harry Potter, you're going to spend $70 on a taxi ride. So maybe you can go see Harry Potter next time. So, it all connected together, and it wasn't intuitive to come up with that service, but you always start with the problem, figure out what you're trying to solve for, and then brainstorm and talk and talk and talk. And you can come up with hundreds of ideas. Some of them you're not going to be able to do because the technology is not there yet, or the law won't allow you to do it, or you don't have the funding. But if you keep coming at problems in an innovative way and really open-minded way, you will always find solutions. And differentiation is really the only way you can compete today, because technology is moving so quickly. Zoom is the place to be today, but I guarantee you someone's in some lab right now creating a company that's going to knock Zoom off their pedestal, just like they knocked Skype off their pedestal. And it's just competitive. And so that differentiation is going to be key to everything, and how you deal with your customers and make their vacations easier, more convenient, more personalized, developing that emotional connection. That's kind of Walt Disney World. We say, we on the way to your we go through your heart on the way to your pocket, right? On the way, we want to get you an emotional connection. And once you have an emotional connection with a company, you will pay a lot for what they do because you have a connection with them. Thanks, Larry.
You bet.
Yeah. So I think this innovation, once again, just, this is something you got to be doing all the time. And when I say all the time, you should literally once a quarter set a couple hours aside to take your team and just go get someone who can help you think about things and take a step back away from the business. I've learned working operations, when you get so close to it every day, it's almost impossible to innovate, because all you see is trying to make things more efficient. And making things more efficient is absolutely necessary and extremely important part of business. But making things more efficient isn't innovating. Innovating is changing the way you play the game. Getting more efficient is being better at playing the game. So if you can constantly be trying to get other ideas of how do you change the game, how do you change the dynamics of how you're delivering your services, you'll always be ahead of that. But it takes discipline to do that, because the fires you have to put out every day prevent you from thinking long-term. But you don't think long-term, one day you're just going to work hard, and all of a sudden your business is going to disappear and you're going to wonder what happened. So that's a really important part of this. And when I say innovation, I'm not talking about creating an Apple computer. Innovation are very simple things. It's very simple changes in how you run things can be considered innovation. And I'll just give you another reminder of who knows how to change your business and how to make it great: your customers and your employees. They have every idea that you need. You just have to learn how to ask it, because they know your business better than you do, and you have to see it from their point of view. Tim asked a great question here. I said, you don't monitor your people. You have people you trust. And so he said, surely you don't meant there would be monitoring or performance reporting dashboards. And yeah, there's companies that are saying, I want to see what time you logged in your computer, what time you logged out, how long you took for lunch. I'm not going to say it's most of them, but there's some companies that think that they can go down the path of making people more productive through compliance. And I think you got to get people's commitment, not compliance. And I think when you talk about measuring outcomes, this is probably one of the most important things a leader can do, is clarity of outcomes. Because if you don't make it clear, A, your people won't get to where they want to be. B, if they do get there, you won't even know it, because you don't even know what you wanted to begin with. So I think a lot of what I did in a leadership role, it's easy to say you need to make this many dollars or make this many calls at the end of the week. But unfortunately in leadership, most jobs we have are not that easily measured. So I basically told my team, hey, I just want to make sure the amount of hours you work every day. I'm not going to use that as a criteria to rate your performance. Now, ironically, at Disney and most jobs, you have to work a lot of hours to be successful. I don't care how smart you are or how organized you are, you have to put in the time. But I wanted to be clear with them, just because you get in the office before me or you leave after me, I don't think you're more or less committed. All I know is you're either getting your work done or you're not. And I'm going to look at how your leadership works, what your people think about your leadership. Are you respecting people? Are you listening to them? Do they feel like they want to stay in your organization? Retention. I look at retention. I look at surveys. I go talk to people. How's the leadership here? How do you like working here? Because when you get that right, then the employees feel better. They can deliver great service. Then you can measure your customer results. What's their intent to return? What is their, how do they rate you excellent on a scale of 1 to 5? The big one at Walt Disney World, we use Net Promoter Score. And that's a very common measurement that's used in many different industries. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us this service or this product, and why? So you get qualitative and quantitative information. If you don't know about that, just Google Net Promoter Score, and it's a fantastic way to measure your business. And you can start to measure your people based on those metrics. And like I said, at Walt Disney World, we measured our leaders based on their leadership skills, relationships, listening, follow through, organizational skills, and we measured them on their metrics. Did you make your profit? Did you manage your cost? Did you manage your other expense? Did you hit all your efficiency metrics? Did you put a certain amount of guests through that attraction per hour and hit your targets for the week? So we had very hard metrics and soft metrics, and we combined those all together to determine if people are performing or not. Larry.
Yeah, just another one that you kind of talk clarity, and you also talked about clear expectations, but you referenced about providing feedback and constant feedback and the word notes, or the way entertainment directors, etc. Right. I thought that was a great reference that could be shared with the folks on here.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. You're reminding me a lot of stuff that was in the book I even forgot about. So that's good. Yeah, feedback. I think generally Disney is not good at it. A lot of big companies are not good at it. Most people are not good at feedback because feedback is uncomfortable. It can be awkward. You can do it wrong. You know, and I'm not going to bring in the whole generational thing, but people sometimes say, you know, I don't want to make people mad. I don't have enough people, so I don't want to demotivate them. But I just really believe that feedback is your responsibility as a leader, and you're actually doing more damage to people's careers by not giving them feedback than you are by letting them go kind of let off the hook. And I compare this exact way I look at raising kids. You know, my wife and I, when we raised our kids, you know, if they broke a rule or they lied or they were home late, we didn't say, well, we'll just talk to the end of the quarter, their quarterly review. No, we were talking that night about this because we cared about them and we wanted to keep them safe. And we wanted them to understand how important it was, because lying to us was one thing, but once you get out in the real world, you get fired for that, or you go to jail, or you get in trouble. Now you still get in trouble with your parents, but that's the time to learn this stuff. So you got to give feedback all the time to people. And the reference to entertainment, I thought it was great, because in entertainment, after every show, all the performers get notes from the director. The director will come in after a performance and say, hey, you did a good job. You're smiling 90% of the time, but you really want to think about smiling during your performance. There was that one kick you did. It wasn't quite high enough. You missed your cue by a split second. You want to come in a little bit earlier in that scene. That's called feedback. And all the actors and performers expect notes after every performance, and it's built into their culture. So, and when you play sports, you get feedback all the time from your coach. Hey, you missed that block. Hey, next time you have to hustle on that one. You get it all the time. Why don't we do that at work? And I think we just get caught up and we're too busy to do it. We don't have a good relationship with our people, so we feel awkward giving it. And I think you just have to get to a point, it feels natural and people start to realize it's part of working in your organization. And I do think there's a responsibility for people to ask for feedback too. Sometimes I get people saying, well, I never get feedback. I said, well, I agree. I should have given you more feedback, but you should have been asking for it too. If you never ask for it and assume everything's okay, you're making a big mistake, because there's always something to improve upon. So what I would tell you is ask for feedback more often. And as a leader, provide feedback more often. And if you're not good at it, just start doing it and start practicing it, because the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And the better you get at it, the more trust you build, the more credibility you build, and the more transparency you build. And when you get to that level, that's when teams really flourish, because they don't get intimidated when they get feedback, because they know that their boss cares about them. They're just giving them some tough love to make them better. And it's real important. All right. What questions are coming up on your end, Larry?
Well, Tom, I'm going to throw it back at you. I know you've got some on the Q&A side, so I'll let you ask one of the questions coming up.
All right. Well, Dan, brace yourself.
Okay. Ready.
No, this question is from Joseph with Rainforest. How do you keep the morale of the team together if there's no business during the stay-at-home orders? And I think you've talked around at this a little bit, but it's really I think a challenging one. I think in Rainforest's situation, in addition to that, they're also spread out in several different destinations, not on just on one island. They're on several destinations.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think first of all, you have a little bit of a situation of, are you allowed to talk to your people? I know that when people are furloughed, you know, calling a staff meeting, you can't even do that because you're kind of asking them to work without being paid. So that's problematic. And so I think up front, you either put yourself in a good situation by keeping people on the payroll so you can continue to engage with them. But there are going to be some you can only call, and I'll say make personal phone calls to and check in on how they're doing. But if you have a team that's working from home and you're problem solving and you want to keep them connected, first of all, the fact I'm sitting here at my neighbor's house because someone's looking at our house, hopefully they're going to buy it. I'm at my neighbor's house using his Wi-Fi on a laptop, talking to you all over the place. This is amazing. And I think the fact that if you can leverage technology this way and get your people together regularly, and I don't mean get regularly and talk to them for 3 hours and do a data dump on them. I mean, get them on the phone and say, hey guys, we're going to meet once a week on a topic. This week is what our customers are going to think about the restaurant industry. I want you all to go out and do some research. I want you to go look at some social media, read some articles, and I want everyone to report out next week on some of the attitudes you're reading about, some of the perceptions, and let's brainstorm how we think we're going to reopen rainforest. And then the week after, we are going to deal with some new regulations in our kitchens and new sanitary guidelines. I want you all to come and let's review all the sanitary guidelines we have in place, and let's start brainstorming what possibly may come as regulation. And then let's brainstorm what it would take us to go above and beyond regulations. And so I think the more you're engaging people, you're problem solving, you're now getting people part of the solution, and they don't feel like victims anymore. They're able to participate and challenge their thinking and make them be innovative. And the time right now is not to pull back and let people relax. It's time to push them and brainstorm about the future. Now, you may not implement a lot of stuff you're going to brainstorm, but the fact you've gone through that process is going to put you in a much better situation when you get back into your restaurants, and you're going to have to deal with a bunch of issues you didn't even think about. But the more you can prepare for these things, the much better you'll be. You know, Walt Disney World, every year, huge preparation for hurricane season. And we did that huge preparation, ride out crews, make sure your command centers are working properly, make sure you have all your equipment accessible, make sure you have all the phone numbers of people so you can call them back in, make sure all your cast members know what website to go to if we have a hurricane, make sure we have all our guest communication ready, our discount policies. And for 15 years, we didn't touch it because we didn't have a hurricane. And the year we had it, we were ready because we get practicing, and we were ready for that, and we had prepared ourselves. So I think the more you can prepare right now, don't wait to go back to start to prepare. You can start to prepare right now, get your people in the right mindset, and engage them mentally. And the more you do that, like I said, the more you're going to have them being busy, thinking about getting ready for the future, not dwelling on the really tough situation you're in right now.
Yeah,
My 2 cents.
And it sort of underscores your last slide there of Innovate. And I think that also you covered very nicely Sabrina's question as well. So I'll jump over to Danielle. Her question is, what advice might you have for how destination can reimagine or have techniques to reimagine their experiences for cruise guests during the new normal? And I think this is from Aquila Tours, so they're obviously a tour company looking for things for the guests to do once they're in a destination.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you have to be practical, and you also have to be innovative. So I think you need to start with what are you offering today, and what is problematic today that will be problematic in the future. Well, we used to pile 15 people into a van and take them to somewhere. Okay, in the future, what does social distancing look like? All right, well, how are we doing that in the future? Do we have to buy 5 vans, or can we find smaller vehicles to do this in? Or can we contract locally to transport people so they're not having that social distance, they're keeping their social distancing? Are we going to provide masks for people? Or are we going to create really cool masks and have them buy them from us? It's funny, 3 months ago when masks came out, I told someone, there's someone at Disney right now designing Iron Man's mask. And sure enough, people are like, how did you know? I'm like, what do you mean, how did I know? Of course they were. It's an accessory. We love accessories because you have to buy accessories. And once you have an accessory, you need another accessory. And we make a lot of money off that. So I think, first of all, look at your current experiences and take them apart and find out what are all the pieces and parts that are going to be a problem in the future because you can't operate the same way as you did before. And then I think you got to take a step back and then say, what are the new experiences we're going to offer? And experiences maybe you haven't done in the past because they weren't adventurous enough or they weren't as interesting. Maybe they're back in play now. Maybe instead of doing the adventure hike, you're going to tell people, you know what, we're going to take you to the beach and we're going to do, we're going to have a down day at the beach, but you're going to be apart. You're going to be safe. We'll have some activities. So I think you got to take a real creative mindset. You have to take a practical mindset and approach them from both directions. And then once again, I'll come back to this idea, and I won't get into depth here, but there's a concept in creative thinking called lateral thinking. And lateral thinking basically says, let me think about the business I'm in, and then let me think laterally and bring other ideas into it. And I'll give you some examples of companies that started with lateral thinking. And I'm gonna make this more dramatic than it probably was. 2 guys come out of a bar, it's raining, and they're trying to find a cab, and a cab's not coming by. One goes by and the light is on, it's not available. They go, man, this is terrible. What if every car were a cab? How cool would that be? Well, what do we have today? We have Uber. Every car can be a cab. When people go on vacations, I have this extra room in my house. What if I could stay there? Now you have Airbnb, the biggest hotel company in the world now. So the lateral thinking is when you get two concepts and you bring them together, you create a third concept that's going to be a new idea. And the more you can do that, the better you'll be. So I would say to you is take what you're doing in the cruise industry right now, look at what those things are, and maybe go visit theme parks and find out how they're operating theme parks and bring those ideas back into your business and incorporate those. I'm not big on giving a lot of credit to authorship. I just want ideas to be implemented. So don't get too tied up on whose idea it was. It doesn't matter. As long as you can implement it to monetize it, you're going to be in a great position.
Love that lateral thinking.
Yeah.
One question from Kirby Day up in Alaska. This is all very helpful. How would you help an employee who needs the structure of an office environment to succeed and is having some trouble balancing the work with having to work from home due to the office closure? Not everybody finds it easy to balance this and with the family. I know you touched on that in your talk, but I think work-life balance is important.
Yeah, I think certainly creating structure is important. And my wife and I, we've been married 27 years successfully, and we've worked together for 2 years semi-successfully. We had to relearn how to have a working relationship because we had never worked that closely together. And we're running a company now together, and we had some pretty stressful moments. And so instead of getting frustrated every day, we started to create structure. So I'd get up in the morning and I'd say, you know what, we're going to walk the dog, and then I'm going up to Starbucks for 2 hours. I'm going to my office to get my work done. And one day she's like, do you go up there because I always talk to you when you're at home? I said, absolutely. When I'm here, you want to talk. And when I'm here, I need to work. So I'm just going to, instead of getting into that whole routine, I'm just going to go someplace else. And that way we have structure now. Now, if you don't have a Starbucks to go to another room. And if you don't have another room to go to, put a sign up, in working right now. So you almost, it doesn't seem natural, but you have to start creating some rules about how you're going to get things done. My wife and I now, we used to want to get some work done. She'd say, do you want to talk about this now? I said, no, I don't feel like doing it. Let's do it tomorrow. We wouldn't get it done. So we schedule meetings now. I say, hey, 2:00 today, I put on the calendar, we're going to talk about that new project coming up. And we sit down for an hour and we treat it like a meeting. And I know it sounds strange, but being married and working together are not the same things. So I think creating structure is important. And the other thing I think is not everyone has the flexibility, but I just read an article. It said, forget about work from home. It should be about work from anywhere. So it's not about being at home. It's about being anywhere to get your work done. And I'm a big believer. You really have to think about, I talked about integrating your life, but you need to think about that. When you're at home with your kids, do you want to be sort of halfway involved with what's happening? Or do you want to be all in when you're with them? And then when you're actually working, be totally focused on that. And how do you make that happen? And believe me, I've seen more kids crawl up into people's laps during webinars and during Zoom calls than I care to imagine. And I let them off the hook because my kids would have done the same thing. I'm just lucky enough to not have little kids running around, but give people a break too.
Well, work from anywhere, including your neighbor's house. And by the way, your neighbor has a really nice house behind you.
Well, I'll do a little trivia here. Does anyone know, this isn't my neighbor's house. Can anyone guess where I am? And it's not a real place. Any guesses out there? Now remember, I worked at Disney before.
Hard to see, Dan, with the shared screen. It's not very big.
Okay. Well, anyway, if you saw Incredibles 2, they lived in my dream house. There you go. Kelly Morris got it. Hey, Kelly Morris, you get a free book. After this is over, make sure you email Larry or Tom your mailing address. I'll get you a book and thanks. So anyway, yeah, it's their secret lair in Incredibles 2. This is where the Parr family lives. So I like this background.
One interesting question. This might be a good one to wrap up on. For aspiring leaders, what do you think is the most important thing to focus on?
Woo. If I knew that, I wouldn't be working so hard. I would say continuous improvement. Continuous improvement means you're always knowing that you can get better. It means you always know you can become more self-aware. It means you always know there's something more to learn. It means you're never done. And if you can be focused on continuous improvement and know that you're never going to be done learning and you're never going to be done improving, and there's always going to be something to know about, I think you'll always be in good shape. Because I've seen it over and over again. People get to a certain level and they sort of say, well, I've arrived, and you've never arrived. The day you think you've arrived, you're done. You got to stay humble and you got to keep learning, and you can learn from anybody. And so continuous improvement, self-improvement, I think is so important. You know, I'm 51 years old and I'm a scrappy entrepreneur now. And I feel like I just started over. And it's awesome. It's a lot of fun and it's very humbling, but man, it gets your energy back up again. So if you can be in that mode and take on things that's this venture and just continuously improve, put yourself in difficult situations, keep exposing yourself to new things, you're going to have not only have a great career, I think you're going to have a very fun life.
That's a great response. I think, Larry, I think that's all the questions.
I've got to ask Dan to, if you can do it in 15 seconds, great, or 30 seconds. Can you talk about stop, start, and continue real quick?
Yes.
That's a great tool.
Yes, it is. We use that at Disney extensively. So as a leader, if you ever want to figure out how to become a better leader, get your team together, go in a conference room, and put up three boards, three pages, big pages. One should say stop, one should say start, and one should say continue, and leave for 2 hours, and have them as a group talk about all the things that the company or you as a leader should stop doing and prioritize that list, all the things you as a leader should start doing and prioritize that list, and all the things they think you should continue doing as a leader and prioritize that list. And if your ego can take the hit and come back in the room, and as a committee, as a group, they can give you that feedback, you are going to become a much better and better leader, because they're going to tell you all your blind spots, and they're going to tell you what you're doing well, and they're going to tell you where you're deficient. Most leaders can't handle this. They can't handle their direct reports giving them this kind of feedback. But I did it my whole career, and it made me really good, and it made me recognize things that I was failing at, and it made us all get better. So I think it's a great tool. You can do it with your wife. You can do it with your kids. You can do it with your people you're working for. You can do it with your boss. It's a great way to learn how to improve the business or improve your relationships or improve your performance in a very constructive way.
And it works. You got to be committed to it.
You got to be committed. Don't ask unless you're ready to change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
good.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dan. And
Good.
Just overall, thank you for, sharing everything that you did. We truly appreciate it. We will get Dan's presentation so we can add that to our website. Dan, I want to give you a shout out and let you kind of one more time hit up on the book.
Yeah. So culture-kingdom.com. It's for sale, $20. That includes shipping, and I'll ship it to wherever you are. You can go on the website. I talk about the book. You can just see it all there. dancockerell.com is my main website. And my wife just designed a website of all websites called cockerellconsulting.com. That's really well done. So if you want to get the book, you can go to any of those sites, and there's a link there to take a look at it. And once again, it talks about leadership. It talks about, there's a lot of stories in it, and it talks about a lot of practical behaviors that you can implement to become a better leader. There you go. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dan.
All right.
For all our listeners out there today, we really appreciate you joining us today, and we look forward to having you join us next week at 2:00 on the 10th for Thinking Differently with New Technology. As the recovery unfolds, one thing is certain: tourists are already thinking differently about how they will travel, what they will want from their next trip. We explore opportunities and discuss best planning for the new dynamic and how digital consumer tools can play a part in the mix. The Vox Group will be presenting. Please visit our website at www.destinationstogether and register for next week's webinar on Wednesday. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. Be strong, be safe, be healthy. And Dan, thanks again.
Thank you. Be safe. Thanks.
Dan, thanks again. It was awesome. Until next time, stay healthy and take care of each other. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.